2 January 1965. Dearest Suzie, well, I will get to come home this year. Isn't that great? We should be back in Vin Long Monday. I'm just about ready to go back and get to work. At least we have gotten an awful lot of rest up here. How were your holidays? I hope that everybody had a good Christmas and New Year. We did absolutely nothing New Year's Day. I did make a 1-hour flight to deliver some ammo to an outpost south of here. This afternoon we have a mission, but it will only last about an hour. How is the weather at home? Are you all having much trouble with colds? I have had a bad cold since we came up here. Maybe I'll be able to get rid of it when I get back to Vin Long. We haven't been paid yet, and I guess it will be Monday now before we get paid. I did not open your fruitcake yet. I'm going to save it till I get back to Vin Long so I can sit down in my own room and have coffee and enjoy it. And after I finished it, I gave it to an orphan's home near here so some little kids can enjoy it too. Notice the new address form for over here. I miss you all very much, and I'm counting the days till we can be together again. At least we are in the right year. All my love, Bill. Once again, Poppy mentions the orphans at the nearby convent here, an indication that they were often on his mind. I'd have to imagine particularly because he was thinking about his kids at home and he understood the type of situations many of the kids were in due to the decades of fighting in Vietnam. His mention of the fruitcake reminded me of the time Meemaw sent him a pecan pie in the mail. I don't believe he mentions it over his letters, so I'll see if I can recall the story well. Apparently, at some point, possibly over the phone, Poppy mentioned to Meemaw how he missed pecan pies and good desserts. In an attempt to bring him a small tin of happiness, she made him a pecan pie and tried sending it to him in the mail. As she's explained, she didn't quite realize that it would spoil on its journey. Perhaps she didn't realize how long a pecan pie could keep. Maybe she thought the trip wasn't that long. Who knows? Apparently, by the time it got to him, it was very moldy and spoiled. He allegedly got pretty angry with her for her not realizing what would happen and made sure she knew it when he spoke to her next. This, in my opinion, is an example of her naivety and is evidence of her age. It's important to remember that when she and Poppy married, she was young, at least by today's standards. She didn't have much support from her parents, and for the most part, got away from home as quickly as possible. There was still a lot she had to learn. At least she was trying to do something nice, though. If you knew Meemaw, this story wouldn't surprise you. You'd just laugh alongside her at Poppy's expense. Finally, to provide a quick update, I feel like I should let you all know that I've learned to play Pinochle. It is hard to pick up, and learning from a computer or YouTube video is pretty difficult. That being said, I've been playing non-stop. I downloaded a mobile version of it on my phone, and I play against some pretty serious bot competition. I also forced my friends to learn it on New Year's, and we got 4 hands into it before everyone decided they had better things to do. I feel like that, in itself, is an accomplishment. I hope you can spend the time to try and pick it up as well. I think it'll be worth it. Maybe if we ever meet, we can play together. The photo I chose for today depicts a child running through a field chasing cows. Behind them is a helicopter with 2 people standing next to it. Behind that are some buildings. Perhaps the kid is one of the children Poppy met at the orphanage and gave the puzzle to. This is probably one of my favorite photos of Poppy's. There's an ironic juxtaposition between the innocent play of a child in an agrarian setting with a helicopter parked in the middle of it. The helicopter being the newest and most versatile weapon of war for the day. It represents technology, globalism, violence. The child and the cows represent farming and play, innocence. I'd like to think Poppy recognized this irony. Perhaps he just thought the kid playing with the cows was a happy sight and wanted to remember it. Who knows? (1965) 1-3. My Dearest Suzie. Well, I am back home again, and already in the groove. We got back last night at 6 o'clock, and I was up at 5 this morning flying. I got 6.5 hours today. But at least the time flies when I work hard. I think that you will hear from me more now, too. It is a lot easier to sit down in my own room and write at my desk. Up in Da Nang, we practically lived out of a suitcase. When we got in last night, Charlie's jacket was laying on my bed. The nuns really outdid themselves on that job. They used the one that you sent for a model and fired him up with W3 bars and wings and even a cigarette pocket on the sleeves, just like ours. These pictures I'm sending you were made last night with a Polaroid camera. Notice the one picture of him on the bar? He pee-peed all over the bar before we could get him to pose for a picture. The cutest thing of all, though, was the laundry bag they made for him. Each of us have our own laundry bag with our name embroidered on them and our laundry marks. My laundry mark is 48/0. Charlie's laundry bag is real small, and his mark is 48/00. Isn't that cute? I'm real happy that Mickey is stopping by to see you. I hope he enjoys his stay. Your check is real small this time, I'm afraid, since I had to pay back some rations, but maybe this will help some. I miss you all very much, and I will write more tomorrow. All my love, Bill. I feel that today is perhaps the best day to introduce you, formally, to Charlie, Poppy's monkey. He was a macaque, which is, interestingly enough, still a common, though mostly illegal pet in Vietnam and the rest of the region. Though I don't particularly have the full story of how Poppy acquired Charlie, I was first introduced to him when, like most young boys, I asked my parents if I could have a monkey. They told me to ask Poppy what monkeys were like, since he kept one as a pet in Vietnam. But ultimately the answer was always going to be no. From that moment on, it became a well-known fact that I told almost all of my friends that my Poppy had a monkey when he was a soldier in Vietnam. By the way Poppy wrote about him in his letters and talked about him, as well as all the photos he took of him, you could tell he really cared for the little guy. The jacket that Poppy refers to is an almost one-for-one recreation of one of his dress shirts. The nuns hand-stitched a small shirt for Charlie, complete with snap buttons to keep it securely to his body. On the nameplate, it says Charlie, and, like Poppy describes, it even has his rank and insignia as well as a tiny cigarette pocket. Obviously, Charlie is named ironically after the Charlie in the trees. At least he had a sense of humor about these things. When I was an undergrad in college, I took a class which really stuck with me. It was a seminar of 13 students and the one professor called War in Literature and Film. It was a course where every week we read a different novel about Americans in war, starting with the Civil War and the short story Chickamauga by Ambrose Bierce, and ending with Phil Clay's Redeployment. In that course, we read 2 books about Vietnam and also watched Apocalypse Now. It inspired me to ask more thoughtful questions about Poppy's time in the service. As a result of asking these questions, Meemaw surprised me and sent me a package in a bubble mailer. It was Charlie's shirt. This surprise excited me so much that I immediately emailed my professor and asked if I could bring in my grandpa's monkey shirt from Vietnam. He said I could and was incredibly surprised when I brought in a shirt that fit a monkey with warrant officer bars and a nameplate. He thought it was just slang for some jacket Poppy used to wear. The class was enamored with the artifact, and we spent most of our day talking about Poppy and things like Charlie's shirt and how they related to the books we were reading. At that point, I knew so little that when we read in Michael Hare's Dispatches a passage about a guy at the Battle of Huey with a monkey, almost everyone, my professor included, was convinced that it was Charlie. It wasn't, though, but I wanted to believe it was. After college, I framed the shirt in a shadow box. I hung it on a tiny hanger and printed out 2 photos of Charlie. I kept it in my room in my parents' house until I moved out for good when I offered it to my dad. He took the VC flag and a few other things for his office at home, and I thought it fit. What happened to Charlie after Poppy left Vietnam? Well, somewhat similar to the little orphan girl, I know Poppy worked tirelessly to bring Charlie back to Florida, but failed completely. The story they told us as kids to freak us out is that he was probably eaten by the Vietnamese people. This is probably just a remnant of a story that soldiers would tell their loved ones to mess with them. I'm sure my dad or Meemaw will call me after they hear this and correct me, but I believe he was actually given away to another guy in the company. You'll know if I was right if I correct this record later. You'll see as these letters go on that he was mischievous and often got himself, and by extension Poppy, in some trouble. One last fact. He was also parachute trained. Maybe we'll talk more about that later. Maybe there's even a picture of it. Also, perhaps this should be the subject of a different podcast entirely, but my other grandfather, my mom's dad, who served in Vietnam before Poppy as a mechanic in the Air Force, also had a pet monkey. I guess it was a common thing to do, but I thought that would be funny to mention. The photo I chose for today is the one Poppy describes in his letter. It features Charlie in his shirt, sitting on the bar of the officers' club. I assume it was taken just after he pee-peed everywhere? There's another one that he also sent that featured him holding Charlie with a big smile. I'm glad that his exotic pet could bring him moments of joy. I'll find a place to share that photo later on. 9. January, 1965. My Dearest Suzie, I got the pictures today that you sent to the boys. They looked real cute, and so did you, except you looked scared to death. But I was real glad to get them and look forward to more. Well, I haven't had a break since we got back, but I don't really care. Working hard all the time, I don't have much time to think about all the time I have left. Today, we had a big troop lift. We put enough troops into an area to capture a whole VC regiment. Guess how much damage they did? They killed 1, captured 2 suspects, and picked up 1 weapon. Not really worth all the effort. I have been asked over and over since I got back to join the armed platoon. If you remember the program we saw on TV, you know what they do over here. Al Guthrie is in an armed company in Saigon, and he really enjoys it. I gave it some serious thought, but I'm not going. It would be real interesting, but I think I'd take enough chances over here as it is. Sunday. I'm sorry I didn't finish this letter last night, but news is so scarce and hate to send 1 page. This morning, all we did was train right here picking up sling loads. This afternoon, I have to go out and shoot auto rotations for a while. We had mail call at noon today, and I got 2 letters. One from your mother, and one from B and Al. The one from your mother was so nice that I'm going to send it to you to read. It is the longest letter I have ever seen from her, and the letter I got from B was 4 pages long and was very interesting. I still haven't opened your fruitcake. I'll start to, then tell myself that once it is open, then I have nothing to look forward to. Don't worry about that fish necklace. It was only aluminum. They have some over here made of silver. I'll get you one of them before I come home. Let me know if you think you can get along without any money from me next month. If you can get along, I'll keep that check. I am supposed to go to Bangkok next month, and I want to make sure I have enough money to shop around with. Tell the boys that I love them, and I miss them very much. My feelings and loneliness for you has only changed one way. I miss you more than ever, and love you more. I guarantee you that things are going to be a lot different when I get home than they were when I left. There are a lot of things that we should have done together that we haven't. I mean to be a lot better father. That is what I'm trying to say. All my love. Bill. Poppy starts writing this letter on a Saturday and finishes it the next day. In the beginning of things, we see further evidence of his opinion on the war and the futility of it all. They did a huge troop lift, moved all those people, and for what? To kill 1, capture 2, and pick up some weapons. It's hard to imagine that he isn't sitting there wondering if it's all busy work, as if they needed to find something to do to keep the troops occupied to justify their time over there. Not to spoil things, but take note of the offer he receives to be in an armed company. Now he's just moving supplies and troops, as well as conducting medevac or search and rescue missions every so often. He's getting shot at, but not intentionally. Not like he would if he joined the armed company. His mention of auto rotations is interesting because, quite frankly, he hated them. We'll definitely hear more about them later. An auto rotation is a critical emergency maneuver performed in helicopters when the engine fails or power is lost. It allows the rotor blades to continue spinning and generating lift using airflow as the helicopter descends. This is possible because the blades are designed to freewheel, meaning they can spin independently of the engine. Pilots use auto-rotation to control the descent, converting potential energy, the altitude, into kinetic energy, which is the rotor speed. By carefully managing this energy, the pilot can execute a controlled landing, often with minimal or no damage to the aircraft. Auto-rotations are a fundamental skill for helicopter pilots and are practiced regularly to prepare for emergencies. It's a good thing he's practicing these. His mention of the fish necklace excites me because I still have that necklace. It's pretty interesting because it possesses a tail which articulates like a swimming fish. I don't think it's worth anything, but it's a really unique piece of jewelry, and just another thing to use to materially connect with his letters. Finally, I must say that the final paragraph is heartbreaking. To know how things turned out, to see this promise made to be a better husband and father, to know how much worse things get from here for him in his time in Vietnam, It would break anyone's heart to read this. Let's just say his sentiments at the end of this letter may be true, but he doesn't do a great job acting them out later in life. The photo I chose for today was at first a mystery. It shows two young Vietnamese men. Their hands are behind their backs. There is a shadow of an M16 on the left. Without any other photos, it'd be hard to say what is going on without any certainty. But I can tell you that they are prisoners of war. There are other photos of them being patted down and questioned. What happened to them after this photo was taken? Were they executed? Sent to a camp? How old are they? They look quite young. Are these the guys they got into all that trouble over to capture? January 1965. Dearest Suzie, how are you and the boys getting along? I hope you're all right. I haven't had a letter from you now in 4 days. What is the matter? Yesterday, I had to take another ship to Vung Lon to be repaired. I had to stay up there overnight. One thing I really get enough over here is moving around. Sunday, I had to take a check ride. It was quite unexpected, but I passed it with no sweat, so now I am an instructor pilot. How about that? A W1 IP. We got in 7 new warrants today, so I know I'm going to be pretty busy for a while. We only have 3 IPs in the company, and we will have to check all these new people out. Well, there isn't much happening here. I got Charlie a rabies shot today and had a long talk with the veterinarian. There's a good chance that if he is in good health when I get ready to go home, I'll be able to take him right along with me for very little expense. If I can, do you want me to? I don't want you to think I'm complaining because you've been pretty good about writing, but when I don't hear from you at least every couple of days, I start to panic. I will close for now, sending you all my love. I miss you very much. Sincerely, Bill. In this letter, we first hear about Poppy becoming an instructor pilot. As I've previously mentioned, after he got back from Vietnam, he was offered the chance to be an instructor in the States, but gave it up knowing he would not train people fully, and that they would be subjected to what he went through in Vietnam, or worse. But he seems to be excited here. He's happy to be a W1 instructor pilot, and was perhaps excited to spend his time training new pilots, which meant he wasn't spending his time doing other things. We also see him ask Meemaw about bringing Charlie back to the States with him. I find this so fascinating. Is Charlie a pet? Is he a souvenir? What sort of life did Poppy see him reasonably having living in the United States around his wife and 3 young children? There's no way you'd want to raise a kid near a monkey, even if it was one you loved and spent time with. If he had stayed in the military, did he expect the Army to let him keep Charlie on some base? It is with this question that you can't help but feel some sort of pity for Poppy. His only real sort of distraction or entertainment becomes his friend, who is a monkey. He desperately tries to bring him back to ordinary life, but is shut out. He isn't allowed to. How many people felt the same way? Did my other grandfather? Also, does stuff like this still happen today? You hear stories of veterans bringing back stray dogs from war zones. Are there other animals? Is this a unique case just found in Vietnam? Finally, I'll point out how he notes her lack of letters. Though at the end of his letter, he apologizes for asking about why she isn't writing to him as much as he'd like, this, as with many other things, is a constant motif in his writings. For contemporary audiences, this anxiety may seem undue or unfair, but we live in the information age. We live in a period of constant global communication. There are essentially no limits to communicating with other people. You can video chat with anyone around the world and speak to them in real time, seeing their face and hearing their voice. Meanwhile, merely 60 years ago, he was lucky to get a photograph and to hear a recording of his son's voice on a magnetic strip situated inside a plastic cassette tape. Even for people old enough to remember these days, or to remember a time before cell phones, this expression of frustration from Poppy may seem futile. But what else does he have to look forward to? You may remember the days before all of this communication, but there may still be a lot you've forgotten. This may be a stupid point to make, but you're listening to me anyway. I binged all of Seinfeld a few years ago. I made the observation that had it not been for answering machines on home phones, I don't think the plots for episodes of 90% of Seinfeld, Friends, or other 90s sitcoms would have been possible. There was enough drama caused by those. Imagine how much more slowly things used to be even before that. How much more time you'd spend anxiously waiting for the postman to come by and deliver a letter. How let down you'd feel when it's been days and you haven't gotten any new word from your wife on the other side of the world. It's just a lot to consider for a contemporary listener. The photo I chose for today depicts a helicopter flying low to the ground. It holds 4 soldiers, 2 pilots and 2 people I assume to be gunners. They're looking at the camera and smiling. Perhaps they're going on a training mission. If I were the guys in the back, I would hope it wasn't an auto-rotation. January 1965. Dearest Suzie, still no mail. But I don't blame you for that. We haven't had any mail come in for 3 days. However, I'm told that we will get a big shipment in tomorrow. I sure hope so. Today was pretty interesting. It was the first time I've actually had a chance to use my IP position. I had a brand new warrant officer today. We flew for 5 hours, and I think I did it very well as an instructor, blowing my own horn again. Then tonight, I had to take another man up for a 2-hour night check. Tomorrow, I get a new captain to teach. How are things at home? I know I don't have to ask if my boys are being good. I know they are. How's the car getting along? I hope you aren't still having trouble with it. What do the girls have to say about their necklaces? Next month is my trip to Bangkok. I'm really looking forward to going. Mainly because when I get back, I will just about be halfway through this tour. September still seems a long way off. Well, I'll close this letter for today. I just got word that I have to get up at 4:45 in the morning for a troop lift, so I'm going to bed. All my love, Bill. Though this letter is short, I feel it speaks a lot about Poppy's character, and quite frankly, it makes me consider how much I'm like him. I know that a broader goal of this podcast is to talk about inheritances, about things that we are given by those who come before us. Sure, I've been given many material things from Poppy in his time in Vietnam. I have his letters, diary, photos, artifacts, and even an NVA rifle. I'll talk about that later. But what else did I inherit? I've talked about his alcoholism and my family's struggles with addiction, but here we see a pretty human side to Poppy. We see that he's embarrassed to mention he may have done something well by commenting that he was blowing his own horn again. Is this humility I also feel? Do we Lowies have an inability to take pride in ourselves when we do something well? Would Poppy argue that being a good instructor is just part of his job and he should be good at it anyway? Also, knowing that he was an instructor to pilots as well as a drill instructor before, it reminds me of how I've become a teacher. In graduate school, to help pay for my education, I acted as a teaching assistant and associate for years, teaching numerous classes. I found myself oftentimes reluctantly admitting how much I loved to teach. It was frustrating and hard. You don't get rewarded the way you deserve to, and for the most part, people are unappreciative for the hard work you put in. But that doesn't matter. It's fulfilling anyway. You know you're actively making a difference in someone's life. I would be the first to say that the context surrounding these two things is very different. He was a pilot in a war zone, teaching other people how to fly a dangerous piece of machinery. I was a wannabe doctor at a university teaching overprivileged young adults how to talk about human sexuality and culture. At the end of the day, however, we were both sharing what we knew. We were trying to make a difference. We were getting by the best we knew how, helping others to learn. I've never really thought about Poppy in this light until now, but perhaps he would have made a great teacher had he not experienced Vietnam. Of course, I say all this, and I'll hear from my dad and his brothers about how mean Poppy was regarding their education. For example, I won't name names, but one of them is dyslexic, and when the school system offered to send him to a special needs school for his dyslexia in the 70s, I've been told that Poppy beat him viciously for being dumb. I don't think I could get away with that in a classroom today. Not that I've ever really wanted to. The photo I chose for today depicts a soldier in his fatigues standing in front of what looks to be barracks. There are wooden buildings with metal roofs. Their walls are wood and mesh. That's likely there for ventilation while simultaneously keeping the bugs out. If you look close enough, you can see bunks lining the walls. This is a look at the soldiers every day. This is where they slept. This is where they lived. It's a personal look at something we don't often see. It may not be as exciting as a monkey or a helicopter, but it's probably more real. Saturday, 16 January. Dearest Suzie, I finally got 2 letters from you today, and I was glad to get them. I'm glad Mickey came to see you, and I hope he enjoyed himself. How come he spent so much money on the kids? Is he divorced? I can't remember. I've been thinking about your trip to Hawaii. I don't want to discourage it. If you want to come, I will be glad, but if you do come out there and we spend a week, I don't see how we can possibly go to see your folks this year. And I would really like to go up and see them, and I know you would. And we would be able to go up there when I come home and enjoy ourselves. No money problems. We can do one or the other with no problem at all. It is completely up to you, whichever you prefer. We are still flying our tails off. I will be flying all day tomorrow, but the time is flying too, so I don't mind working every day. Charlie is the same. In fact, everything is the same over here. Nothing exciting happening these days, and that is just the way I like it. I guess the boys really enjoyed their Uncle Mickey, huh? Does Brian still ask for his daddy? Did you get to see me on TV? When are you going to send me a tape? I look for one every day. I miss you all very much and love you very much. Sincerely, Bill. Today, I'd like to talk about photography, specifically film photography. This was how Poppy took all of his photos, by using a 35mm film camera. Taking a photo with a 35mm film camera is a beautiful blend of art, mechanics, and science, and it's important to understand the physical photo-taking process so we can better comprehend what Poppy accomplished as a photographer. If we were to track how real life becomes a picture, we'd start at the lens, which is the eye of the camera. It gathers light from your chosen scene. This light passes through layers of precisely arranged glass elements which direct photons to converge on film at the back of the camera. The amount of light which enters your camera is controlled by adjusting the aperture, which is a diaphragm within the lens that opens and closes to create a circular hole. A wide aperture lets in more light, which is perfect for dim conditions or achieving a blur. A narrow aperture reduces the light but increases the depth of field, keeping the entire scene sharp and detailed. The volume of light alone isn't enough to capture a moment. The duration of its exposure to the film must also be controlled. This is done by the shutter. The shutter is like a curtain that rests in front of the film, blocking light until the shutter button is pressed. When a photo is taken, the shutter briefly opens to allow light in to hit the film, then quickly closes again. The length of time it stays open is called the shutter speed. Faster speeds, such as 1/1000th of a second, are ideal for freezing fast motion. Think of a bird mid-flight, its wings suspended in the air. Maybe a helicopter. Slower speeds, like 1/30th of a second, allow more light to reach the film, making them useful in low light settings or when you want to capture motion as a blur for artistic effect. Slower speeds require a steady hand or a tripod to avoid unwanted shake. As light enters the camera, it finally reaches the film, which is a thin strip of plastic coated with a light-sensitive emulsion. This emulsion contains microscopic silver halide crystals. These crystals react chemically when exposed to light, recording the intensity and pattern of the light that hits them. Bright areas of the scene cause more of the crystals to change, while dimmer areas affect fewer crystals. At this stage, the image is invisible, existing only as a latent image, a kind of hidden map of light and shadow. The sensitivity of the film to light is called ISO. Lower ISO films, like a rating of 100, require more light but produce finer grain, while higher ISO films, like a rating of 800, are more sensitive, but grainier. Once the shutter closes, the camera's internal mechanism advances the film. A small gear system winds the exposed frame into the spool and positions a fresh, unexposed frame in front of the shutter, ready for your next shot. But capturing the image on film is only the beginning. The latent image needs to be developed through a chemical process to bring it to life. In a dark room or specialized lab, the film is submerged in a developer solution. This chemical reacts with the exposed silver halide crystals, transforming them into metallic silver particles. These particles form the dark areas of the image, corresponding to the brightest parts of the scene. A stop bath halts the development process, and a fixer solution stabilizes the image by washing away any unexposed crystals, ensuring the film can be safely exposed to light without further changes. What emerges is a strip of negatives. On these negatives, light and dark are inverted. The brightest parts of the scene appear darkest, and the shadows are light. While in a war zone, often flying, Poppy utilized his mechanical camera to capture images with photosensitive film preserving what he saw forever on silver halide crystals. Photography is a simple yet delicate process, and in my opinion, his photographs are one of the greatest achievements of his life. To conclude, I'll share that today is my birthday. If you are enjoying the show, it'd be a real gift to me if you would like this episode and subscribe to the show. If you feel compelled, feel free to comment your thoughts on things or email me. I'd love to hear from you. Most importantly, there's enough of the show out by now for you to know what it is. Consider finally taking the time to share this with someone who you think would enjoy it. Perhaps your grandparent is still alive and they remember the 60s. Maybe you have a friend who is a war buff. Either way, sharing would be the greatest present to me. The photo I chose for today is a blurry, dreamlike photo of Charlie wearing his shirt, sitting on the ground, and eating something. I chose it because it's one of my favorites. Happy birthday to me. 18 January 1965. My dearest sweetheart, when I came in this afternoon, I looked in my mailbox and didn't have a letter from you. I was so mad at you. I waited 3 days for the mail to come in, then nothing from you. But then tonight, Lit checked the mail and brought me 2 letters from you that the mail clerk forgot to put in my box. So I apologize to you. I should have learned better by now. You have been so good about writing for the past 4 months that I should know the foul-up was not you. Anyway, I was glad to get the pictures. I would have liked to get one of you. Don't worry about sending me anything of you. Write regularly and tell me you love me. That is all I need to keep going. I finally opened the fruitcake night before last, and it was delicious, but it was very rich. I couldn't eat very much of it at the time, but I guarantee you that it will not go to waste. Brett is real cute in that picture. I would sure like to have a picture of him with his hair cut. Brian, of course, gets cuter every day, I'm sure. And Billy is just like his dad. Just plain Billy. But he is a good boy. Louis Litt says hello, and the kids look outstandingly outstanding. Now to get back to my letter. I have not seen anything of the airplane you mentioned sending. However, I think it was real nice of you to send it, and it is probably somewhere in the mail between here and Da Nang. I'm glad you like the jewelry. Did you send the bracelet to Audrey? I have 2 pictures of Charlie like the ones I'm sending you that I'm going to send her. I wish you hadn't told everybody that I was going to be on TV. You all are going to be disappointed if they cut that part out, and you will be sorry you said anything. I don't know what to tell you about the license plates for the car. You will probably have to buy Florida tags, and I don't know when. Things are the same here. I've been flying every day. The last week has been pretty quiet. We had a troop lift Saturday, but it didn't amount to much. I think they finally wound up killing 2 VC. In fact, it is so quiet it scares me. I'm afraid that something big is about to happen, because the VC aren't this quiet without a reason. Well, I will close for now. Don't even think or worry about sending me anything. Just write and keep on taking care of yourself and the boys for me. That is all I care about. I love you all very much. Sincerely, Bill. This episode resolves our Bob Hope saga from around Christmas. Though he never actually told Meemaw not to tell anyone about the special, in fact he encouraged that she watch it, he uses part of this letter to chastise her for telling people about the episode. He doesn't confirm whether he was ever on this, and he told Meemaw it was supposed to air on January 15th. After reading this letter, I got pretty curious. Did he ever actually get featured on the program? To answer this question, I first decided to look up Bob Hope Christmas Special 1965 on YouTube. I found an ad or 2 and some clips, but not actually the full special. I needed to see the full special. Next, I opened up my search results to the rest of Google. Perhaps they'd have it there. I found a few articles looking back fondly upon the old Bob Hope specials, which he did for multiple years during the Vietnam War, but nothing about 1964 in Vinh Long or Da Nang. Finally, I looked to the last place I had any hope. eBay. I hoped I could find someone selling something with the specials. Thankfully for me, the specials were collected and reproduced in the early 2000s in a boxed set of DVDs. They were pretty cheap, which I was thankful for, and I ordered them without bartering. Couldn't miss the chance to buy something that literally no one else was interested in. The day it arrived, I didn't check my mailbox until about 10 p.m., and when I saw what had arrived, I ran inside. Though my fiancé asked me nicely to go upstairs and start getting ready for bed, I couldn't wait any longer. I quickly threw the first DVD in my Blu-ray player and hoped to find something cool. Sorry to disappoint you, but he was not featured after Jerry Colonna was on in Da Nang, Vinlong, or anywhere else. He was not in the special after all. Though I did not see what I was hoping to see, my grandfather nestled among a crowd of GIs taking in the entertainment. I must say, this is all one of the most exciting parts of this project. I consider myself to be growing his archive, to be expanding the search. It's like the investigation that follows a crime in a mystery novel. Evidence is there. I just have to find it. So, although he wasn't featured, I hope you also enjoyed this small story of discovery, or rather lack thereof. But it isn't the destination, it's the journey. The photo I chose for today depicts the same USO show I showed before. This time, we see two women playing guitar and singing into a microphone. Behind them is a man playing the drums, and another the bass. Though this isn't Bob Hope or his act, it's at least a good point of view photo of what the troops may have seen. At least at some point. (22) January, 1965. Dearest Suzie, I'm sorry I waited so long to write, but I kept thinking I would get a letter from you. Either our mail is not coming through fast enough, or you aren't writing enough. I haven't heard from you since Sunday, and here it is, Friday. Needless to say, my morale is very low. Mail has already come in today, and no letters, so I can't even look forward to mail till Sunday again. Things are the same over here. We stay pretty busy flying. It is hotter than blazes already, and they say that hot season hasn't even started yet. Well, in 4 days, we will have 1/3 of our time over with. It seems like a lifetime already, though. Yesterday, Cosumano tore a helicopter up. He lost a tail rotor, and the thing flipped over in the water in a pond right off the end of our runway. He was real lucky that he wasn't killed. The tail rotor that came off hit Lieutenant McConnell's ship and put 2 big holes in it. He was lucky, too, that that thing didn't hit him. Anyway, we do have a little excitement once in a while. Also, yesterday we had 2 gunships shot down by the VC. They burned one of them. Nobody was hurt, but they sure had us worried for a while. I love you all and miss you more than ever. I can hardly wait for these next 8 months to go by. Kiss the boys for me. All my love. Bill. Over the next few episodes, I will be presenting a piece of creative nonfiction I wrote for a class in my PhD program. As I've explained before, COVID meant that there wasn't much of a chance to go outside and do formal research for my dissertation, and therefore I had to find other things to write about. This was one of them. This will be presented over the span of a few episodes, with a break in the middle, because it's pretty long compared to what I usually share. Hopefully, you will be able to keep up with things. There will be a bit of information from before repeated, but let's just say that it's for the people who haven't been keeping up with every episode. Also, just so you know, this was written about 3 years ago. Things have certainly changed a lot since then. With that said, I'd like to present Finding My Grief, Part 1. It was a late morning, but I was still exhausted. Sleeping on the tiny, lumpy couch did not provide me with any sort of rest. Going to bed at 4 a.m. the night before certainly didn't help either. The many heavy footsteps in the tiny trailer made it nearly impossible for me to obtain any sort of deep sleep. When I awoke, I mindlessly flipped on the TV, hoping to distract myself. Some random movie started, one I had never seen before. The opening credits focused on a truck driving down a lonesome road. Johnny Paycheck was blaring from the lead's speakers, and he sang, "Well, I say, friend, don't take her, she's all I've got. Please don't take her love away from me." The sink turned on in the kitchen behind me. I quickly turned around to find Meemaw standing there. She was sluggish, and obviously hadn't gotten any sleep either. Her eyes were bloodshot, but she didn't look like she had cried in a few hours, which I figured was a good thing. I noticed she was watching the movie as well. She listened to the music too. Oh no, I said to myself, turn off the TV, dude. I frantically started pulling up the covers around me, looking for the remote to stop the song from coming from the speakers, but it was too late. Meemaw gave me a fake smile. "Morning, Al," she said, sipping on her coffee. "Hope you slept all right." She turned to walk back to her room and began singing to herself, seemingly clinging to every word, almost like she had heard the old song for the first time. I'm begging you, friend. Don't take him. He's all I've got. He's everything in life I'll ever need. Great, I said to myself. What did I just do? Merely a day before I was in school, completely oblivious to what was to come. A text came in randomly from my mom saying, "Call me, this is serious," or something like that. At first, I thought it was about Penelope. My family got her when I was 4, and we knew that she was slowing down. Sluggishness was typically a good sign that a Labrador was nearing its end. I called during my first free moment of the day. It wasn't Penelope. It was Poppy. I was somehow relieved that the bad news wasn't about the dog. My grandfather had finally passed, which was no surprise. We all knew it was coming for some time. Cycling in and out of the hospital, his respiratory problems had been getting worse than ever due to his COPD and asthma. The multiple packs of cigarettes a day probably didn't help much either. Mom broke the news through sobs and uncontrolled breaths. I did not cry. I was simply angry. What else could I be? Years of begging that he care for himself had only resulted in his apathy to life, even though his doctor told him he could live up to 5 years longer if he quit smoking. Poppy told us of their conversation through thick, sour smoke that seemingly always hung around the air in his orbit. The 5 extra years didn't matter to him. The extra time would have meant my high school graduation, a handful of other graduations, meeting great-grandchildren, and every holiday you could imagine being spent with his big, oftentimes unhappy family. Sitting on the porch and sucking in tar took priority, or at least that's how I viewed it. Who could really blame me for my anger? I also felt annoyed. It was the day of my thespian induction ceremony. Finally, I was going to light the candle and join the club I worked so hard to get into. Suddenly, I wouldn't even get the chance to really celebrate, seeing as how immediately after the ceremony, we'd have to load up the car and drive 5 hours straight to Georgia. I wanted to have fun with my friends. Maybe by going to Steak and Shake and getting something sweet to celebrate. I did not want to sit in a car for so long on such short notice. When everyone found out that my brother and I would not be attending dinner, their dispositions immediately changed. What was supposed to be a carefree night of celebration mutated into expressions of sympathy and support. People were caring and understanding, but I was not looking for those things. I was looking to be angry and annoyed. As a kid, my grandfather was the coolest person I knew. He was a war hero and a fisherman and someone so cool that he didn't even have to speak. When he entered a room, you knew. Why didn't he want to spend more time with me? Why would he put us all through this? Why would he leave Meemaw so alone? She deserved only happiness. The photo I chose for today shows a Huey helicopter as a part of the 114th Aviation's Cobra Division, hovering lightly over the ground. This is certainly not Casimano or Lieutenant McConnell. I don't actually have any more photos of wrecked helicopters besides the one I shared at the beginning of the show, which might actually be Casimano's. Regardless, I really like this photo. This helicopter possesses rockets on the side of it. This is almost certainly an assault ship. "245 days. 23. January, 65. Dearest Suzie, I received 2 letters from you today, and needless to say, I was real pleased. I was especially happy to hear that you took Billy roller skating. I hope you will take him out like that as often as you can. I remember that I used to like to skate, but of course I never went enough to be any good. Tell Billy that I enjoyed his letter. It was very sweet. I'm going to keep that one in my souvenir box. I was sorry to hear that the boys had colds. I hope that they are better by now. I was tickled to death to hear that you had met someone there in the same boat that you are in. I don't know this guy, but I know a lot of people in town in Sok Trang. I'll sure make it a point to meet him next time I go down there. We do go to town there quite often for troop lifts. That is where Hampton is stationed, by the way. Bert Badgett and I play pinochle just about every night. I taught Louis Litt how to play, so we usually play as partners, and Bert has his own partner. Everything is the same with him as far as I know. I don't know of anyone else that is going with me to Bangkok. I won't know for sure if I'm going till I get orders. Our orders are for R&R have to come from Saigon, so we never know till the last minute. Charlie is the same. If nothing happens between now and the time I get ready to come home, I'll try to bring him. Well, I started out thinking I had all kinds of things to write, but I have just about wrote out. Tomorrow I'm scheduled to give about 4 check rides, but it's Sunday and these people don't like to work on Sunday. They're all captains, so I imagine they will find some way to think out of it. We had a troop lift this afternoon. It was a real nice one. Not a shot fired. That's the kind of thing I like. Things are pretty quiet around here right now. That worries me. There should be a lot of fighting going on this time of year. I'm afraid that the VC are up to something. Oh well. Enough of this rambling talk. I miss you all very much. Tell Billy to write me again, and I hope Brett is not hurting too bad with his new teeth. Or is it new tooth? All my love. Bill. If you haven't listened to last episode, you'll likely be a bit lost for the rest of today's. Long story short, I've split up a piece of writing of mine, and I'm presenting it across a few episodes. I recommend going back and listening to the earlier part. Anyway, here's Finding My Grief, Part 2. Highway lights flashed like strobes and faded into nothingness, leaving me with only the dark night sky of the country. My ears were stuffed with tiny speakers, loudly playing whatever could fit onto those 64 gigabytes on my light blue iPod mini. Let it be, crooned Paul McCartney. I can't, Paul, I thought. Everyone was in their own worlds. Mine was statuesque and paranoid that someone would notice the tears streaming down my cheeks. These aren't tears of sorrow, I told myself, just anger. A young man could not be vulnerable. I felt worse than I thought I possibly could walking into the trailer. Meemaw was sitting there, crying, struck with grief and 55 years of for better or worse. There was nothing I could do to help. Catholic teachings and parables became mantras expressing that Poppy was in a better place now, even if he was a Baptist, and she was sure God would still let him into heaven. Meemaw was the glue that always held the family together, but now she was falling apart. When they moved up to Georgia only a few years before, we all questioned the decision. After all, Poppy's health was getting worse. Why would he want to go to the middle of nowhere? What would they do if there was an emergency? I asked my parents, and they joked that all Lowies wanted to return home to Middle Georgia to die, like elephants. Originally, I was told the story that the night Poppy died, he woke up in pain. Meemaw, who rarely slept full nights herself, ran into his room and helped ease his troubles with some painkillers. What was strange is she decided to stay with him, which was something she typically didn't do. She told us she lay next to him in bed until he fell asleep. She said he seemed at ease, and she reveled in the moment until she herself fell asleep. The next morning, she woke up, and he didn't. I've been told by one of my oldest cousins since that it didn't happen that way at all. I should have known better, even at the time, but I guess what really happened doesn't matter much. I prefer the story I was told. It's a prettier picture. In the years following, Meemaw chose to sleep in Poppy's room. At first, we thought she was just being polite and giving up her bed for others to sleep on when we came up for the funeral, but she never actually left his bed. She never seemed to want to offer an explanation why, either. Ironically, a Lowie family reunion was already planned for the weekend that Poppy passed. His siblings and cousins had already been funneling into McRae from all around the South to attend. Dad joked that Poppy was so cheap he didn't want people spending money to come to his funeral. Nearby, Little Okmulgee State Park hosted the Celebration of Life, a place used regularly for the not-at-all annual family reunions. Dozens of people I barely knew swarmed us, looking at us with that face, that you're so poor and helpless and you lost your grandpappy and now we're all here to watch you squirm look. I went on walks by myself, avoiding the crowd and the attention. I took photos of the foliage and talked to myself as a distraction. At one point, my father, who typically maintained his composure, grabbed my brother and I, leading us down a random road which led to a campground. He wanted to be alone. Nothing was said. All remained quiet. Like the breaking of a dam, he broke into tears. He hugged us. He never hugged us. This is the only time I remember him crying during my entire childhood. I didn't even see him cry when Penelope was put down. I vividly remember the hug, which is likely the last time he probably hugged me. He cried and told us how much he loved us. I cried too. So did my brother. The photo I chose for today is an aerial shot of a few buildings on fire. Smoke is pluming in the air. This is certainly not from a troop lift, but it still feels related to today's letter anyway. "8 months, 25, January, 65. Dearest Suzie, I received your latest letter this morning. I hope that Brett's feeling better by now. I know that he is miserable, teething this late like he is, but I am glad to hear that he is finally getting teeth. I will send John's girls a doll each payday. There are 2 of them, right? I also want to send your mother a little souvenir from here payday. I got another letter from her yesterday. She was just as cheerful as she could be and didn't complain about anything. She told me that she enjoyed my letters. I believe she is very lonely. I can just imagine how she would run around showing off if I sent her something from here, so payday I plan to. I don't think I will go to Bangkok. I've been thinking it over, and the only real advantage that I can see in going would be to rest and sightsee. The way I feel right now, I don't need a rest, and I certainly could care less about going sightseeing by myself. And when I get ready for a rest, I'll just take 3 days in Vung Tan and be done with it. As for shopping, our PX is expanding, and within the next 2 months they expect to have a lot of jewelry and things from both Bangkok and Hong Kong. So I promise you a star sapphire ring before I come home, or when I come home. And 2, it costs about $12 a day just to live in Bangkok, and that is money I could spend better on other things. I don't know yet if I will send you a check this month. You told me that you could get by on $400, so I may just go ahead and buy a slide projector this month. However, if you think you need more money because of car tags, let me know, and I will send my check to you. I don't know where my money goes. I can't think of any that I really waste, but I started this month with $200, and I'm already broke. Of course, my food bill in Da Nang was a little high, and I ate on credit up there since I spent quite a bit on Christmas, so I had to pay that. Then, when we got back here, we still had to pay club dues, houseboy, laundry, and the rest. Then I spent about $8 on film. I do take a lot of pictures, so it goes pretty fast. Already this month, I owe a club bill of $20, but I guess this isn't too bad since we eat all our meals there, and we do get an extra $65 a month for food. I paid as long as I could this month. Normally, I guess my food bill at the club will run $50. That is what it was this month anyway. Anyway, it costs. Well, I guess I've rambled on enough for today. Oh, what the heck. Since this is already such a long book, let me tell you about our club menu. Right after we got over here, they started paying us a cost of living allowance. But one of the requirements for drawing it was that we not eat in the mess hall. So now the mess hall is off limits to us. The club is very poor for eating. Most of the time for breakfast, they have eggs. But yesterday, they ran out of eggs. So this morning for breakfast, the only thing they had was a fried potato cake made from last night's leftover potatoes, those little fat, greasy sausages, and toast, with no butter or jelly. You can imagine how that went over. Our lunch menu is a little better. You can have a choice of soup, most sandwiches, hamburger steaks, and shrimp. Prices are about the same as a post-snack bar back home. For supper, they run a special for 65 cents. That is all you can order. For the last week, the special has been roast beef because that was the only meat they had. I have roast beef running out of my ears. Sometimes they have steak on hand. When they do, you can have a steak supper for $2. About once a month, the club officer will remember to order ice cream. By the time we get it, everyone is so starved the whole order goes in one day. So, there is a little example of life over here. I hope you can read this mess. My ink ran out, my lined paper ran out, and I am about run out of things to write. I love you all very much and think of you constantly. Where is that tape you were going to send? All my love, Bill. Today's letter from Poppy feels like a snapshot of his daily life and a window into his mind. Specifically, his detailed descriptions of shopping, managing finances, and food tell us so much about the personal level of his experiences in Vietnam. Beyond the numbers and his careful explanation of his budgeting, one part of this letter really stood out to me. His vivid and at times humorous descriptions of the food at his club. I've explained before that he was a picky eater, and to know that even when he was overseas, he had a strong opinion on things, is quite entertaining. Bill's attention to his finances is still pretty striking. He starts the month with $200 and is already broke by the time he writes to Meemaw, yet he accounts for every expense, paying off Christmas bills, covering meals at the club, paying the houseboy, buying film for his camera. Even with limited resources, he's thinking about sending dolls to John's daughters, a souvenir to Susie's mom, and maybe even getting a slide projector. And let's not forget the promise of a star sapphire ring. It's also a little funny, in a bittersweet way, to hear him say he doesn't know where his money goes. Between roast beef dinners, club dues, and laundry bills, it's clear life in Vietnam came with its own unexpected costs, and yet he manages to make do. If there's one part of this letter that brings Poppy's experiences to vivid and sometimes greasy life, it's this. Breakfast, for example, wasn't exactly a gourmet affair. On this morning, there were no eggs, so the only options were fried potato cakes made from the previous night's leftovers, greasy sausages, and toast without butter or jelly. You can almost hear his disdain for the limited menu. Lunch and dinner weren't much better. Lunch offered soup, sandwiches, hamburger steaks, or shrimp if you were lucky. Dinner was often a special for 65 cents, but for the past week, that special had been roast beef. He writes, "I have roast beef running out my ears." And you can feel both his exhaustion and his sense of humor about it. Occasionally, there'd be a steak for $2, but that was a rare treat. An ice cream? That was a true luxury. When it showed up about once a month, it disappeared in a day, with everyone scrambling to get even a small taste. It's a detail that's both funny and a little sad, showing how the small comforts of home, even something as simple as a scoop of ice cream, felt like treasures. Bill's description of the food aren't just entertaining, they offer a glimpse into the larger realities of life in Vietnam. For instance, one reason the food was so limited is that the soldiers were given a cost of living allowance, which meant they couldn't eat in the mess hall and had to rely on the club for their meals. This detail alone shows the complexities of military logistics and how even something as basic as food could become an unneeded daily challenge. Even with these challenges, Bill's focus never wavered from Suzie and the family. He worried about sending enough money home, promised her that star sapphire ring, and explained how he always kept her in his thoughts. The photo I chose for today depicts what looks to be the interior of the Officers Club. If it is not the one in Vinh Long, then it is at least one somewhere. It features many colorful chairs in the foreground with a few guys sitting in them. There's a bar in the background to the left with a menu board above it, and back on the right wall there appears to be slot machines. Perhaps this is where he found his addiction to the one-armed bandit. His favorite was the Blazing 7 slot machine, and when I was growing up, if you visited him while he was on his computer, you'd typically find him playing a free slot machine game or Bejeweled. Friday, 29 January, 65. My dearest Suzie, I received your letter tonight, and I was glad to get it. I know that these are very lonesome times for you, but for what little consolation it is to you, I assure you that you and the boys are on my mind constantly. I don't think there is anything that we can do about that last Christmas present. It really hurts me because I could really use it, but we had an illegal setup on getting our mail up at Da Nang. If it had gone through normal channels, it would have taken us 2 more weeks to get it. So we had a pilot pick it up here and take it up for us. When he got up there, he had to put it in an unlocked box for us. So I'm sure that if someone took it, they took it out of that box. The pilot who took our mail up is a good guy, and he was just doing what we asked him to do. So if I said or did anything about a missing package, he is the one guy who would be in trouble. So I'm sorry that you lost the money, but I know that the thought was there, and that is what counts. This picture that is enclosed was made about 15 minutes ago. We are in the middle of a platoon party. We have a new platoon leader now, and this is his way of getting acquainted. So, we are having steaks and beer tonight. That guy in my lap is Charlie, in case you hadn't noticed. This has really been a week for us. We have had a troop lift every day. I have been subjected to enemy fire 37 times this week, and tomorrow we have at least 2 more lifts. All the action that I was worried about coming is here, I'm afraid. Oh well. Just look at how fast the time passes for me. Yesterday afternoon, I hauled about 17 wounded people out of an area that had been mortared by the VC. One of them was a woman, about 23 or 24 years old, with a baby, about 8 months old. She was alive when we landed at the Vietnamese hospital. The baby wasn't. They had both been hit by mortar fragments. Last night, I didn't drink a drop, but you can understand why tonight I have decided to get drunk on my blank. Enough of that bad news. I'm fine. The only thing that has been damaged for me so far are my feelings. I love you all very much. Naturally, if I love you, I have to think of every young woman and every kid that is hurt in this miserable place, and it makes me sick. I'll quit. I will try to write sooner next time. All my love. Bill. Today's letter from Poppy comes at the end of an emotionally and physically grueling week. It's a deeply personal letter, filled with reflections on his family, camaraderie, and the devastating realities of war. Poppy is writing during a rare moment of respite, a platoon party meant to welcome their new leader, but the letter is anything but carefree. He begins by addressing the missing Christmas package, a small but meaningful loss. The informal system of transporting mail in Vietnam meant that the soldiers had to rely on creative but unreliable methods to get their letters and packages. In this case, Poppy and his unit asked a pilot to fly their mail from Vinh Long to Da Nang, but the mail was left in an unlocked box, where it likely disappeared. Despite the loss, Poppy's letter shows his understanding of the situation. He refuses to place blame on the pilot, a good guy who was just trying to help. Instead, he reassures Suzie that the thought behind the gift mattered more than the gift itself. The letter quickly shifts to the challenges of the week. Poppy writes that he's been under fire 37 times in just 7 days, a staggering figure that underscores the relentless danger he faced. Among the most harrowing moments was evacuating wounded civilians from a village that had been mortared by the Viet Cong. Poppy describes one rescue that will stay with him forever. A young woman, likely in her early 20s, and her baby, only 8 months old. The woman survived, but the baby didn't. Poppy's words are filled with anguish as he admits that the emotional weight of these moments is overwhelming. That evening, he made the decision to drink during the platoon party, not to celebrate, but to momentarily escape the pain. Was he thinking of his wife and infant back at home? He said he was. Brett, after all, we know, was teething. He wasn't much older than the baby that didn't survive the helicopter ride. Who did Poppy blame for the baby's death? The mom? The VC? His fellow American soldiers? Was there anyone to blame? Amid all the chaos, Poppy's love for his family remains a steady anchor. He reassures Suzie that she and the boys are always on his mind, even in his darkest moments. But that same love makes the suffering he sees all the more unbearable. He writes about how every young woman and child he encounters reminds him of his own family, making the violence and loss even harder to process. His compassion shines through even as he grapples with the horrors of war. Here, we've seen another example of the senseless violence he witnessed during the war, and he's only a third of the way through his deployment. As I've alluded to before, when he got back to the States, he wasn't a great person. I can't imagine just how much of these scenes grind down his very soul, damaging his spirit and throwing him into a despair that he can only cover up with alcohol. It's a pain so deep that he transfers it onto his kids, some of whom then later have the same problem. Poppy ends the letter by apologizing for the delay in writing and promising to do better, despite the circumstances. It's a poignant reminder of his commitment to staying connected with Suzie and the boys no matter how difficult things become. Almost as if it was his duty to continue to share his pain with his wife. His resilience is evident, not just in his ability to carry on, but in his determination to share his thoughts and feelings with the family he holds so dear. The photo I chose for today depicts a mother with her baby. It was taken at the Bangkok Zoo. The baby is holding up a treat. This was taken weeks after this letter was written. When he saw his mother and her child, did he think about the two he mentioned in the letter? Was he happy to see a baby smiling and happy to be at the zoo? Did he ever see the dead child in his nightmares, even when he was in his 60s, sleeping in his own room away from Meemaw? Sunday, 31 January. Dearest Suzie, I received another letter from you today. Mail must be getting to us more regularly now. I'm getting along fine, working hard every day. I got paid yesterday, and I went right to the PX and got the last slide projector that they had. It was only $27, and it is a real good one. I like it, and I'm sure you will. Louis Litt is going to Bangkok on the 4th. He took my turn when I decided not to go. Anyway, I'm going to give him enough money to buy a nice sapphire for you. He's not going to have it mounted, though. I figure it is best to send you the stone and let you get it mounted in the States. It shouldn't cost much. Well, February is promotion month. Had you thought of that? We should make CWO on the 13th. Yes, send me Al's hat size. I can get him one of those hats without any trouble. I'll even get all the little crests to go on it, too. That ought to give him something to crow about. Say hello to my boys for me. I miss you all very much. I have just about given up hope of getting a tape from you. I love you all very much. Sincerely, Bill. If you haven't listened to episodes 36 or 37 yet, you'll likely be a bit lost for the rest of today's episode. Long story short, I've split up a piece of writing of mine, and I'm presenting it across a few episodes. I recommend going back and listening to the earlier parts. Anyway, here's Finding My Grief, Part 3. Dad started a business to free up his schedule and help raise us. When Dad was growing up, Poppy was always off fishing, only coming home to bring gifts and beatings. Dad coached baseball teams and drove us to school. Poppy bought expensive things for the boys, even when Meemaw had to work 2 jobs. Dad would drink a beer or 2 on New Year's. Poppy would spend more time drunk than with his family. What did this all mean to Dad? What did it have to do with what was happening now? We stood there, saying things we never usually say to each other, and haven't even acknowledged since. Maybe Dad didn't say everything he always wanted to say, and maybe he actually said all the things he wished his dad had said to him but now never could. Eventually, the 3 of us returned to the pavilion, hosting the reunion with red, dried eyes and steady breaths. Not much more happened the day of Poppy's funeral. I was young. I moved on. And years later, I realized I didn't really know Poppy personally. By the time I became an adult, I was left with so many what-ifs. I hadn't spent the time talking to him like I should have when I had the chance. The only thing I have left of that day is a few photographs. One in particular shows all of us, sitting in lawn chairs, next to my grandmother, who is holding an oversized and pixelated picture of Poppy. Hey Meemaw, I finally mustered up the courage to speak to her about everything one day while visiting her in her trailer before she moved in with my uncle in North Carolina, when she could still comfortably take care of herself. Can you tell me more about Poppy? I realized I never really got to talk to him like I wish I could have. Sure, honey. What do you want to know? I don't know. How did you guys meet? Why did he join the army? What was his favorite book? She sat there, somewhat unresponsive, pretty unwilling to answer. I met him in New Jersey, you know that. Yes, but how? Wasn't he older than you and from Georgia? How would you even come across him? Then she told me the story. One day, long ago, Sue went to New Brunswick with her friend Betty to shop. They were from a small town southwest of the big city comprised mainly of Polish and Hungarian Jews, many of whom had since become Catholic to blend in with their new surroundings and seem more American. Like any other public outing, they wore their best dresses, which were likely handmade since they both came from very poor families, and while waiting at the train station, Betty caught the eye of a young private in the army, a man named Buster. For Buster and Betty, it was love at first sight. Sue, on the other hand, was introduced to his sour-faced, quiet friend, Bill, who was also a private at the time and stationed nearby with Buster. For Bill and Sue, it was contempt at first sight. Bill thought Sue was foolish and immature, while she thought he was standoffish and rude. They were, however, both willing to support their friends and agreed to go on a double date with Betty and Buster, which was the only way Betty's parents would allow her to go out with an older man, especially one in the army. A few nights later, Buster and Bill went to Betty's house to pick up she and Sue. Of course, Betty could not sit next to Buster in the car because that would be inappropriate, so she and Sue were forced to sit in the car's rumble seat, shaking all the way to dinner and risking rain, which would certainly ruin their hair. Soon after the night of the double date, Sue received letters from Bill. He had a hard time showing it, but he actually liked her and wanted her to know it, in his own way, of course. Sue warmed up to him, realizing that he wasn't so bad after all, and quickly recognizing that pursuing a relationship with him was probably her best chance at getting out of her poor, tiny town. Bill quickly climbed the ranks in the army, going from peeling potatoes to help feed refugees in nearby camps, many of whom were from Hungary, which gave him another reason to hate Sue, to getting his GED and qualifying for warrant officer school. This meant he'd head south soon, and wanted Sue to accompany him. They had one speed bump, though. She was underaged, and needed parental permission to marry him and start her life. Sue knew she couldn't ask her grandmother, or older sister, or any of the people that actually took care of her. She couldn't ask her mom. It would be impossible to go to the psychiatric hospital upstate on her own, and nothing guaranteed her mom would even sign any papers. So, she reluctantly turned to her dad, having to track him down to one of the many bars he frequented in town. She saw him infrequently, typically only as he stumbled down Main Street. She was embarrassed of him. Who wouldn't be embarrassed to say they're related to the town drunk? She marched in and demanded he sign the paper, mustering up the only courage she had in her body to demand her freedom. He had one question. Will this man take care of you? Will I have to worry about you ever again? Fighting back tears, she replied, No, he'll do more for me than you ever could have. Fine, her dad replied, signing the papers and quickly dismissing her. Get going. With that, she packed up her few belongings and headed straight for South Carolina, the only state they could find that would allow them to get married at such a young age. The rest is history. The photo I chose for today depicts someone walking through a rice paddy. It appears to be just off a main road. I'm Alex Lowie, and I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode of Dearest Suzie, and receiving messages from the past that my poppy wrote exactly 60 years ago. I sincerely appreciate your time and interest. Please consider following the podcast on your preferred platform, and if you're enjoying it, I kindly ask that you take the time to rate the show and leave a review. Also, please follow the project on YouTube, X, and Instagram. All likes, comments, shares, and reviews will help grow the reach of this story. The links for these things should be in the description of this episode. Please feel free to email me at dearestsuziepodcast@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to say. I'd love to chat or to hear about your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and God bless.